20 minutes after they buried Tom Sullivan, his sons were already trying to sell his tractor. Not next week. Not after the reception, right there in the church parking lot, while their mother still held the folded American flag from his casket. Margaret Sullivan stood next to her 1979 Ford LTD in her black funeral dress, 62 years old, 43 years married, and her oldest son, David, was explaining why she needed to give up the farm immediately. He worked as an accountant in Des Moines, wore a $600 suit, and hadn't touched farm equipment in 6 years, except to lean against it during Christmas photos. "Mom, we need to talk about the farm," he said, using that particular tone reserved for people he considered unreasonable. "You can't run this place alone." Mark, the younger son, chimed in from beside his new Buick, insurance salesman, Cedar Rapids, checking his Rolex because he had a golf game tomorrow and this was taking longer than expected. "We've already got a buyer lined up for the tractor, Guy from Hartman's auction company. He'll give us $8,000 for the Super M. Fair market value. We can have it picked up Monday, money in your account by Wednesday." Here's what strikes you about this moment. These weren't cruel men. They genuinely believed they were helping. They'd done the math, run the numbers, consulted with each other over the phone probably a dozen times in the week. Tom was dying. They had a plan. It made perfect sense to them. Sell the equipment, lease out the land to a neighbor, move Mom to town where she'd be safe and comfortable. Clean, logical, reasonable. They just never considered asking Margaret what she wanted. "No," she said quietly. David's face shifted. "Mom, be reasonable. You're 62 years old. You can't farm 320 acres alone. You don't know how to run the equipment. You've never driven a tractor in your life." Margaret looked at her sons, at David in his expensive suit, at Mark glancing at his watch again, at these two men who'd grown up eating meals paid for by that exact tractor they were so eager to sell before their father's grave was even filled. "Your father taught me," she said. "Last year, when the diagnosis came, he taught me everything." Both sons stared. The parking lot went quiet, except for car doors closing in the background, people leaving for the reception. "What are you talking about?" David asked. He knew this was coming, knew I'd be alone. "So he taught me how to farm, how to drive the tractor, maintain it, plant, cultivate, harvest, everything. I've been learning for 8 months. David's face flushed the way it always did when he was angry. "That's ridiculous. You're a woman. You're 62. Farming is hard physical work. You'll kill yourself trying. Dad should have known better than to put these ideas in your head." Notice what's happening here. This isn't really about Margaret's age or gender or physical capability. It's about control and expectations and the deeply uncomfortable feeling of watching someone you've categorized a certain way suddenly step outside that category. David and Mark had already calculated their inheritance, the equipment, the land, everything Tom had built over 36 years of farming. They'd already spent it in their minds, and now their mother was threatening that calculation. "Maybe," Margaret said, "but I'm not selling the equipment. I'm not leasing the land. I'm farming it myself." Mark went cold. Flat voice, total certainty. "You'll fail. Within a year you'll be broke, and we'll have to bail you out financially. Just sell now while the equipment still has value. That's the smart move." Margaret got in her car and drove to the community center, leaving her sons standing beside their expensive vehicles, looking stunned that their mother had just defied them. What they didn't understand was that Margaret had been preparing for this conversation for months. Tom had warned her it was coming. "The boys will want you to sell everything," he'd said. "They'll think they're protecting you, but they're wrong." To understand how Margaret ended up in that parking lot, you need to go back 8 months, to March 1983, when Tom Sullivan came home from the doctor with a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. Stage 3, inoperable, 6 to 9 months to live if they were being realistic. Tom was 64. He'd been farming since he came back from Korea in 1953, 30 years of working land. The 320 acres were paid off, had been since 1978, 5 years of being completely debt-free. The equipment was old but functional. A 1956 Farmall Super M, a 1968 John Deere 4020, a 1972 International Combine. Everything paid for, no debt anywhere. Their sons had left farming years ago. David went to Iowa State, got his accounting degree, moved to Des Moines, married a city girl, had kids who'd never stepped foot on a farm. Mark went into insurance, same story. Both had good jobs, comfortable lives, zero interest in farming. Tom and Margaret had accepted this reality. The farm would end with them. That was just how it was. 2 days after the diagnosis, Tom and Margaret were sitting at their kitchen table. Evening, dishes done, sun setting over their fields. Tom said, "I need to teach you how to farm." Margaret wasn't sure she'd heard right. "What? I'm dying. Doctor says 6 to 9 months. You'll be alone. The boys won't come back. They've made their lives in the city. They'll want you to sell everything, move to town, liquidate." He paused. "But Margaret, this farm is your security. It's paid for. 320 acres, all free and clear. You rent it out to a neighbor, you'll get maybe $200 an acre gross. That's $64,000 a year, probably $48,000 net after expenses and taxes. That's decent." He took a breath. "But if you farm it yourself, you'll net 80, 90, maybe 100,000 in a good year. That's the difference between comfortable and wealthy. And you're only 62. You've got 20, 25 years left. That's $2 million difference over your lifetime if you farm versus rent." Here's what's brilliant about Tom's thinking. He wasn't being sentimental. He wasn't trying to preserve some legacy or keep the farm in the family out of pride. He was doing cold, practical math. Margaret was going to live potentially another 25 years. The difference between farming and renting was roughly $2 million. That's life-changing money. That's the difference between scraping by on Social Security and living comfortably with genuine financial security. "Tom, I don't know anything about farming. I've never even driven the tractor." "I know. That's why I'm going to teach you. We've got 8 months, maybe a year. That's enough time if we start now." So they started. Next morning, Tom took Margaret out to the machine shed, walked her through the 1956 Farmall Super M, showed her the controls, the clutch, the throttle, the brake, the hydraulic lever, the PTO engagement. Explained what each did. "Start with the basics," he said, "just starting and stopping, just learning how the machine feels." Margaret was terrified. The tractor was huge, intimidating, dangerous. The steering wheel was massive, the seat was high off the ground, the controls were unfamiliar. But Tom was patient, and Margaret trusted him completely. She stalled it 6 times trying to get it moving. Tom just smiled. "I stalled it 20 times my first day in 1953. You're doing fine." By the end of that first day, Margaret could start the tractor, drive it in a straight line, turn it, stop it. Not smoothly, not confidently, but she could do it. By May, after 2 months of daily practice, Margaret could drive the tractor around the farmyard, could back up a wagon, could navigate around obstacles. Tom pushed her gently, never too fast, but never letting her quit when she got frustrated. "You're learning a skill," he told her. "Skills take time. You didn't learn to bake bread in 1 day. You didn't learn to sew in 1 day. This is the same thing." By June, Margaret was driving the tractor out into the fields. Tom sat beside her on the fender, coaching her through turns, teaching her how to judge distances, how to avoid compacting wet soil, how to read the land. By July, Margaret was planting test rows, learning how to operate the planter, how to set the depth, how to maintain consistent spacing, how to watch for malfunctions. Tom was getting weaker, the cancer was progressing. He tired easily, needed to rest more, but he kept teaching. Every day, he'd go out with Margaret, show her something new, drill her on what she'd learned the day before. He taught her how to maintain the equipment, how to change oil, how to grease fittings, how to adjust belts, how to troubleshoot when something went wrong. "Equipment breaks," he said. "That's just reality. You can't panic when it does. You figure out what's wrong, you fix it, you keep going." By August, Tom was too weak to climb on the tractor, but he'd sit on the tailgate of the pickup truck and watch Margaret work. He'd radio her on the CB if she was doing something wrong, praise her when she did it right. "You're getting good at this," he told her one afternoon in late August. "Better than I expected. You'll be fine." Tom Sullivan died on November 3, 1983. Pancreatic cancer, 8 months after diagnosis. He'd made it through one more harvest. He'd taught Margaret everything he knew, and he'd prepared her for the confrontation that was coming. The funeral was on November 6th. That's when David and Mark made their move in the parking lot. That's when Margaret said no, and that's when everything changed. Here's what you need to understand about farming in 1983. It wasn't like today. There were no computers, no GPS guidance systems, no yield monitors. Everything was manual, mechanical, physical. You learned by doing. You made mistakes, you fixed them, you got better. And it was hard work, back-breaking, exhausting, relentless work. Margaret was 62, never farmed before Tom's diagnosis. No experience, no network, no credibility. A woman in a male-dominated industry trying to do work most people assumed required physical strength she didn't have. But she had 3 advantages. First, 0 debt. The farm was paid for, a bad year wouldn't cost her the land. Second, Tom's 8 months of intensive training. Third, motivation. Her sons had told her she'd fail. Nothing motivates quite like someone confidently predicting your failure. Spring 1984, Margaret's first season alone. She planted corn in late April, working 12-hour days. She made mistakes, rows too deep, too shallow, inconsistent spacing. An experienced farmer would have caught it immediately. Margaret didn't notice until 3 rows were wrong. She stopped, figured it out, corrected it, kept going. The corn came up uneven. You could see the mistakes, the thin rows, the gaps. But it came up, it grew. The neighbors watched, some supportive, others skeptical, waiting for her to fail so they could rent her ground. A few openly hostile, resentful that a woman was attempting male territory. Margaret ignored them all. She focused on the work, cultivating, monitoring for pests, watching the weather, praying for rain at the right times. Tom had taught her that farming was mostly management and timing. Plant at the right time, cultivate at the right time, harvest at the right time. The actual mechanical work was straightforward if you knew what you were doing. Harvest that first year was brutal. Margaret had never run the combine. Tom had shown her basics, but he'd been too sick for real training. She learned by doing, clogged the machine twice the first day, hours unclogging it, lost time, fell behind, worked 16-hour days in October, racing the weather. She made it, barely. Last load out November 2nd, one day before the anniversary of Tom's death. She sat on the combine afterward, exhausted, covered in dust, hands bleeding, and cried. Not from sadness, from relief. She'd done it. The numbers told the story. She'd harvested 240 acres of corn and 80 acres of soybeans. The yields weren't great, maybe 70% of what Tom used to get, but they were respectable for a first-year farmer. After expenses, she netted $72,000. Not the $100,000 Tom had projected, but significantly more than the $48,000 she would have gotten from renting. More importantly, she'd proven she could do it. David called in December. How'd the harvest go? Casual tone, but Margaret could hear the expectation underneath. He was waiting for her to admit it had been a disaster, that she needed help, that he'd been right. Fine, Margaret said. Got everything out. Made a profit. Long pause. You're sure you want to keep doing this? It's not too late to sell the equipment, lease out the land, save yourself the stress. I'm sure. Okay, well, let me know if you change your mind. He didn't call again for 6 months. Year 2 was better. Margaret knew what she was doing now. She planted efficiently, cultivated confidently, harvested with less drama. She joined Farm Bureau, attended meetings, learned from other farmers. Most treated her professionally once they realized she was serious. She netted $85,000 that year. Year 3, $92,000. By year 4, she consistently hit 6 figures in good years, $80,000 in bad. Every dollar went to the bank. Tom had taught her to save aggressively, never finance anything, never expand without cash. Debt is what kills farmers, he'd told her. You can survive a bad year if you don't have debt. You can't survive anything if you're leveraged. Margaret saved. She lived modestly, drove the same Ford LTD, wore the same clothes, ate simple meals. She didn't need much. The farm generated income. The bank account grew, and she discovered something interesting. She liked farming, not the romance of it, not some sentimental connection to the land. She liked the problem-solving, the management, the satisfaction of doing difficult work well. 1988, 5 years after Tom's death. The Des Moines Register ran a feature story on women in farming. They interviewed Margaret. The article included a photo of her on the Super M, looking confident and capable. The headline read, "Widow proves sons wrong, farms successfully at 67. David saw the article. He called angry. "Did you have to mention us? Make us look bad?" Margaret was calm. The reporter asked why I started farming. I told the truth. "Your father taught me. You wanted me to sell." I said no. "Those are facts. You made us sound like we were trying to steal from you." "Were you?" Silence. Then, "We were trying to help." I didn't need that kind of help. Margaret farmed for 22 years, from 1983 to 2005, age 62 to age 84. She bought an additional 160 acres in 1995 when a neighbor retired, paying cash for the land. Her total operation grew to 480 acres. She hired help during busy seasons, high school kids who wanted summer work, young people trying to learn farming. She paid them well, taught them the same lessons Tom had taught her. One of those kids was Jeremy Miller. Started working for Margaret in 1996 at age 16. His father had lost their family farm to debt in the early 90s. Jeremy had assumed farming was just a path to bankruptcy. Margaret showed him it didn't have to be. "The problem isn't farming," she told him, "it's debt. You farm conservatively, save aggressively, never finance what you can't afford to pay cash for, you can make money. Your father's mistake wasn't farming. It was borrowing too much during the good years and not being able to survive the bad ones." Jeremy absorbed everything. He watched Margaret manage the operation, saw how she made decisions, learned her philosophy. "You should farm," she told him his last summer working for her. "You understand it, you understand the numbers, you'd be good at it." "I don't have land," Jeremy said, "can't afford to buy any." "Then rent some, start small, save your money, buy land when you can, but only if you can pay cash. Never finance land, never. That's what killed your father." Jeremy followed her advice, started farming 80 rented acres in 2002. Saved aggressively, bought his first 80 acres cash in 2007. By 2019, he owned 640 acres free and clear. All bought with cash accumulated from farming conservatively the way Margaret had taught him. In 2004, Margaret was 83 when she fell off the tractor. Stepped wrong climbing down, twisted her ankle, fell hard. Lay in the field 20 minutes before she could stand. Limped to the house, iced it, kept working. But it scared her, reflexes slowing, balance fading. If she broke a hip in the field, nobody would find her for hours. Time to stop. She finished 2004 harvest, then made the decision. 84 years old, 22 years farming alone. Enough. She listed the land in May 2005, sold in 6 weeks for $3,200 per acre to a young farmer who'd been saving 15 years. Paid cash, Margaret liked that. Equipment went to auction in July. The Super M, the tractor David and Mark wanted for $8,000 in 1983, sold for $14,500 in 2005. Margaret had maintained it so well for 22 years, it looked and ran like a tractor half its age. Margaret moved to Toledo, bought a little house, settled into retirement. She volunteered at the library, helped with the County Historical Society, attended Farm Bureau meetings, and spoke whenever they asked her to. In 2010, she was invited to speak at an Iowa State Agricultural Conference about women in farming. She was 89 years old, stood at the podium in front of 400 people, and told her story without notes. "My husband died in 1983. My sons wanted to sell everything the day of his funeral. I said no. They told me I'd fail. They told me I was too old, too female, too ignorant. I farmed for 22 years, made over $2 million, proved them wrong." She paused. "But this isn't a story about me versus my sons. It's a story about refusing to accept other people's limitations. My sons genuinely believed I couldn't farm. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to protect me from what they saw as inevitable failure. But they were wrong because they didn't understand what I was capable of. Most people don't understand what they themselves are capable of until they try." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Margaret Sullivan died peacefully in her sleep on February 12, 2019, at age 98. She'd lived 15 years in retirement, longer than she'd expected, longer than Tom had lived after stopping work. She'd seen grandchildren grow up and have children of their own. The will reading happened 2 weeks after the funeral. David and Mark sat in the lawyer's office expecting to split $2.4 million. When the lawyer read that they were each receiving $50,000 and the rest was going elsewhere, David stood up so fast his chair fell over. "That's impossible. She was our mother. We're her sons. We're entitled to that money." The lawyer, Patricia Morrison, looked at David calmly. "Your mother was of sound mind when she revised her will in 2006. She left explicit instructions. You are receiving exactly what she wanted you to receive." "We'll contest this," Mark said. "She was senile. She didn't know what she was doing." Patricia pulled out a thick file. "I have documentation spanning 13 years showing your mother was mentally competent until the day she died. Financial records she kept herself, letters she wrote, conversations she had with multiple witnesses. If you want to contest this will, go ahead. You'll lose, and you'll look petty doing it." They contested it anyway. The case went to probate court. The judge reviewed the evidence, Margaret's meticulous records, her documented conversations with Patricia and others about her estate planning, testimony from people who'd interacted with her regularly, showing she was sharp until the end. The contest was dismissed. The will stood. David and Mark each received $50,000. Jeremy Miller received $200,000. 3 other young people who'd worked for Margaret over the years received $50,000 each. Iowa State's agricultural education program received $500,000. The local FFA chapter received $250,000. Various farming charities and programs received the rest. The sons who tried to sell their mother's equipment while she was at their father's funeral received less than 5% of what they'd expected. The young farmer who treated her with respect and learned from her got 8 times what they got. Margaret had calculated it exactly. At Jeremy's farm, he framed the check Margaret had left him. Didn't cash it for a month because he wanted to look at it, to remember what it represented. Finally, he deposited it and used it to buy another 160 acres. Cash, of course, the way Margaret had taught him. He hung a photo of Margaret in his farm office right next to his desk where he could see it every day. The photo from that 1988 Des Moines Register article showing Margaret on the Super M looking confident and capable. Under it, Jeremy mounted a small plaque. Margaret Sullivan, 1921-2019. She said no when everyone expected yes. She farmed when everyone said she'd fail. She gave her fortune to those who helped her, not those who doubted her. An example for all of us. Here's what this story teaches us. It's not about farming. It's about refusing to accept other people's definitions of your capability. David and Mark weren't villains. They'd categorized their mother a certain way and couldn't imagine her outside that category. They decided what was best without consulting her, genuinely believing they were helping. That's the most dangerous limitation. The kind wrapped in concern and presented as wisdom. Margaret didn't argue, didn't waste energy convincing them. She said no, learned what she needed, did the work, proved them wrong through results. 22 years of results, $2 million of results. Then rewarded people who'd actually helped her. The math matters. If Margaret had listened to her sons, she would have gotten $48,000 yearly from renting. Over 22 years, roughly $1 million. By farming herself, she made over $2 million. The difference wasn't luck or special talent, it was willingness to learn, consistent execution, and discipline to save rather than spend. Tom understood something crucial when he taught Margaret. Competence isn't innate, it's learned. Age and gender don't determine capability, they just determine what society expects. Real security doesn't come from selling assets, it comes from controlling productive resources that generate income. Think about the parking lot moment. Margaret with the folded flag, her sons explaining why she needed to give up. What would most people do? Listen, agree. The sons were educated, successful, confident. They had research, a buyer lined up, it made sense. But Margaret had 8 months of Tom's training. She had information they didn't. More importantly, she had a choice they weren't offering. Stay in control or surrender it. Keep building or start liquidating. Trust herself or trust their assessment. She chose herself. That choice, made 20 minutes after burying her husband, set in motion 22 years of work that generated millions and changed multiple lives. When Jeremy used Margaret's inheritance to buy more land, he continued what she'd started. When high school kids she hired went on to farm successfully, they implemented lessons she'd taught. When young farmers at Iowa State heard her speak, they learned that limitations are often just other people's assumptions dressed as facts. Margaret Sullivan's story isn't about a woman who farmed. It's about refusing to be defined by expectations, learning difficult skills late in life, executing consistently for decades, and rewarding loyalty while teaching doubters an unforgettable lesson. Her sons wanted $8,000 for the Super M in 1983. They got $50,000 each from a multi-million-dollar estate in 2019. The young farmer who respected her got $200,000. The difference wasn't accidental, it was calculated. Margaret knew exactly what she was doing. Sometimes the best answer to people who confidently predict your failure is silence, followed by results. Margaret Sullivan understood that, and in the end, results speak louder than predictions every single time. If you found value in this story, consider what limitations you've accepted in your own life based on other people's assessments of what you're capable of. Margaret was 62 when she learned to drive a tractor. She was 84 when she retired. She made over $2 million doing work everyone told her was impossible. What's your parking lot moment? What are you being told you can't do? And more importantly, are you going to listen?